Hey guys, welcome back to my wood shop again. Today I thought I'd do a little project. If any of you are wood turners, and I like to think of myself as one, I'm sure you've run into instances of, making your bowl blank round. And you can see this one's pretty doggone round. And what I've done for that solution, I made a very simple circle cutting jig out of a sheet of plywood, and I've seen these made several different ways. And mine was the easiest solution I could find, and simply it's just a piece of plywood with a nail pop through there with increments that let you know you can cut 6-inch bowl, 8-inch bowl, whatever you set this nail to be. And then of course you drill a small hole for your center, pop it down on the nail, line the board up, and you just more or less twist it around, and it almost does the work by itself. But the problem I'm having is, I wouldn't say a problem, it still works good. But this one I made for one of my old bandsaws before I got this one. And so this one's a little smaller on the table. And so I found out it's better, or at least for me, if I've got the board I'm using to be pretty much the same size as the table itself. It kind of serves as its own table. So let me get some of that stuff brought over here, and we'll show you what we do next. Okay guys, so we're going to go ahead and measure up this table, and I will say that you can pretty much make this out of about anything as far as sheet goods go. One good option would be something like melamine. This is just a scrap piece, but I don't know if you can see it, but this has a very slick surface on it, and that would make it easier about spinning the bowl blanks on it. But I don't have a piece that large today, so I'm just going to use this leftover piece of plywood I've got, and I think they call this one like a sanded poplar or a prime poplar or something like that. I found this actually before the lumber prices went too crazy. But now I will say this does not have to be exact, but pretty close. It should be what you want it to be. And my table is about 21 3/8 by 15 3/4. So let's go over to the table saw and we'll get it cut there. Okay, as you can see, I've got the piece cut now. That's pretty much the same width as my top. Of course, we need to push through here and get the line for the blade made. And on my last one, I did not use any runners for the miter slots. And I think this one I'm going to do that. The last one I would just push it up here and get it about where it needs to be and clamp it down, and that worked fine. But this one I think I'm going to try the runners for the miter slots here, just to hopefully make that more accurate. Okay, my slots here are pretty standard. They're 3/4 of an inch. And usually you would want to use something like an oak or something like a hardwood for any type of a sled. I don't actually have any of that on hand right now. I've got a piece of cedar, which tends to be a bit soft, but I think for the purposes of this it'll work because it's not something you're constantly using, back and forth all the time. So I think this will work just fine for what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and cut this cedar strip down. We'll get our runners made. Okay, so we're ready to. I've got our the runners here set up, and we're ready to attach this thing. The way I like to do this is get the edges lined up and have just a little piece of this sticking out at the front and the back. That helps with alignment where you can see what you're doing. I'm going to put some glue on this, and I'm going to use some pin nails to kind of set it, and then we'll probably go back with some short screws. Okay, and what I prefer to do, at least so you keep everything straight, we'll go ahead and push this through while holding these runners, and once we get it up here, then I'll hit it with a brad nailer. That way we know everything's kind of square the way it needs to be. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll drop this down to where our blade isn't running away from us. That should be pretty good. Okay, and so the reason I wanted to push that through is so we, I didn't accidentally get it off to one side or whatever. So this is pretty good front and back, side to side. So we'll go ahead and add some pin nails to this. Of course, you want to make sure whatever you're putting into this is not too long that it's bottoming out on the miter slot there. Okay, so that's enough of the pin nails. You don't need a lot, just enough to kind of hold it in place while you get your screws ready. And of course, ideally you'd want to let this sit up for a decent amount of time so the glue can dry. But we'll work on this. I'll get the screws ready and we'll go to the next step. Okay, so we need to pre-drill and countersink for those screws. Of course, you can add, quite a few of those in there if you want. I'm just going to add a couple on each side for the time being. Like I said, make sure you don't go too far. And you do want to countersink these because you don't want the heads of those screws sticking up. Okay guys, we got the screws in it now, and you can see it's moving back and forth just like we want it to. And I will say one tip you might could use, I'm not going to do it because I'm afraid it's going to run into interference with this bar, but you could add a piece here or even here as far as that goes, something to maybe work as a catch so that when you're putting your bowl blank in here or whatever you're making the circle for, that you're not going too far, because once you get the bowl blank on here, you won't be able to see your mark as far as how far you are into this plywood. Of course, you could always just kind of pay attention and catch it with the edge, which is what I've always done, is just make sure it stops where it needs to. But you could, like I said, you could always put a little catch right there, and that would work fine too. So the next thing we're going to do, I found It's the most important thing to make sure the holes you drill in here, and I know this probably, it's old and beat up and stained, but you can see here how I've got all these holes here and got them numbered. And essentially, the way I've got this, that's the number 1 is 1 inch from the blade, so that would make a 2-inch circle. So we're going to make that now because that works out really good. But the point I'm getting at is you want these all to run right straight in line with the blade. You know, this one I've got on there now is just a 1/4 inch blade. That may vary a little if you've got a larger bandsaw blade on there. But we'll work with this one, and it should get us where we need to be. So we're going to use this larger square I've got here. We're going to line it up right with the front edge of that blade. Flip it over and do the same thing again. Making sure everything's square. Let me put my lead out there just a little bit farther. Okay, I'm hoping you can see it there. You can see the lines I've got lined up alongside this blade. And then from there we should make our measurements, our holes, and we may even have to cut part of this runner off there so we can get the nail to come through the bottom. But we'll get that when we get there. Hey guys, just found out I probably had a little bit of bad audio from this wireless mic. I had it on my shirt, rubbing against my whiskers there. So I put it on the old shop apron, moved it down a little. Hopefully we don't get any more interference. But anyway, we're going to come down here. We're going to mark out our measurements from the edge of the blade, and let's do that now. So I found out what works for me is 1/2 inch increments. Of course, I don't do the first half because I'm probably not going to turn a 1 inch circle. I wouldn't want to be that close to the blade. But the first thing I want to do is lay it out. This works too if you got a ruler, but this will work just fine. First thing I do is mark out my 1 inch, 2 inch, excuse me, 3 inch, and so on. The full inch marks, then I'll come back and hit the 1/2 inch marks. And I found out that works pretty good because it's rarely I need a bowl blank to be something in between those. If I've got a 6 inch bowl blank, it's not going to matter if it's a 6 1/4 inch bowl blank. So this works out pretty well. So we'll come back and add the 1/2 inch marks. And one on the end. And so I'm going to mark that at 1, 2, 3. Okay. You can kind of see what I've got going there, and I may actually take a Sharpie to that just so those numbers don't fade. But either way, let's get a drill and start drilling those out. Okay, I don't think this has to be super critical, but we'll eyeball a mark about halfway here, in between, you know, this line and this line. I'll set my square to it. And that'll give us center points for all our points we need to drill through for the nail to come through. And we'll do that now. So for this next step, like I said, we're going to use a nail, and you can see the one I've got here. It was just a standard 8-penny nail. I've actually took an angle grinder and just cut the end of it off and made it a little shorter because it's generally a little too long to be putting a bowl link on. Especially, you know, if you've got smaller bowl, you don't want, you know, a nail sticking out that far. So my next little tip is you can, of course, take a micrometer and measure that thing and try to get close as you can on a drill bit to drill these out. But I find it easier to just kind of go through and look through your drill bits, pick one out that feels like it's about the same diameter, and then make a couple test runs with it. And you can see I actually picked ones a little bit too large, a little too much slop. So I ended up going with the 7/64, and that gave me a tight fit. So we'll go make sure we bore that out just a little so it's not too tight, but not too loose. Okay, so we're almost at the point where we can see the fruit of our labor. One thing I will say on about any sled to make it easier to slide, take you a block plane works too. This is just a smaller version. Take and knock these corners off. It kind of helps it from binding up. And we'll be adding some paste wax on those too. It makes it slide easier. And I'll go ahead and say too that, you know, the little thing I was talking about earlier, putting these little catches right here on the ends to keep it from going any farther. I went ahead and added that. And it's just a piece of, some people call it brown board or hard board. Literally just cut it off, nailed it, put a couple brad nails in it. So let's go ahead and knock this down. And it doesn't need to be much. And you can probably see almost the size of our hair just coming off there, and that's really just enough to keep that from binding up on you while you're moving it forward. Yeah, well, I'll finish these up and we'll meet you back over at the bandsaw. We'll go ahead and wax this thing up. As you can see, I had to cut just a little notch out of that one runner here just so my nail would sit down flush. But not a big deal. I went and added a couple extra screws in there just to keep it square before I done that. We'll go ahead and put this paste wax on here. And this will keep everything moving nice and smooth. And it's always a good idea to keep this on here as often as it's needed, because when it dries out, it makes it a little harder about pushing in there, and you don't want to be pushing on anything through any kind of saws. It's always a potential to cut your fingers or something to that nature, but doesn't take much. Got that on there. That should move freely, and we'll go over to the bandsaw and show you how it works. Okay, so the next step in this, we're going to push this through, turn this on, and when we get to our stopping point, we're going to stop the saw, clamp it down so that it doesn't spin on us when we move it. So let's get started. Okay, and as you can see, we've got a nearly perfect circle there. Good for any bowl blank. Okay guys, so we're at the end here. We've got our circle cutting jig all made up. It's working good, as you can tell. We've got a pretty much perfect circle there. This one ended up being about 5 inch, which was just a scrap piece. But you can literally really go as big as you want to. Now my particular one will cut up to about a 21 inch bowl, because it ends up being somewhere around 10.5 inches to the edge here, and if you double that, that's about 21. But yeah, so hopefully this video helped you out if you found it used for your wood shop. If you're a wood turner, especially if you're a wood turner, it helps you with those bowl blanks. Keeps you from trying to freehand those on the bandsaw. So like and subscribe, do all that fun stuff YouTube likes to throw out there, and I'll see you on the next video.